Hi, my name's Kathryn G, and I'm here to read a story about a young girl who's a Chinese immigrant, and her name's Mia. The book is called Front Desk and is by Kelly Yang. Let's get started. Chapter 1. My parents told me that America would be this amazing place where we could live in a house with a dog, do whatever we wanted, and eat hamburgers till we were red in the face. So far, the only part of that we've achieved is the hamburger part, but I'm still holding out hope. And the hamburgers here are pretty good. The most incredible burger I ever had was at the Houston Space Center last summer. We weren't planning on eating there. Everybody knows museum food is 50,000 times more expensive than outside food. But one whiff of that sizzling bacon as we passed by the cafe, and my knees wobbled. My parents must have heard the howls of my stomach, because the next thing I knew, my mom was rummaging through her purse for coins. We only had enough money for one hamburger. But man, we had to share it. But what a burger it was. It was mile high with real bacon and mayonnaise and pickles. My mom liked to tease that I devoured the whole thing in one gulp, leaving the two of them only a few crumbs. I'd like to think I gave them more than that. The other thing that was great about the Space Center was the free air conditioning. We were living in our car that summer, which sounds like a lot of fun, but actually wasn't, because our car's AC was busted. So after the burger, my dad parked himself in front of the vent and stayed there the rest of the time. It was like he was trying to make his fingers into popsicles. My mom and I bounced from exhibit to exhibit instead. I could barely keep up with her. She was an engineer back in China, so she loved math and rockets. She oohed and awed over this model and this module. I wish my cousin Shin could have been there. He loves rockets too. When we got to the photo booth, my mom's face lit up. The booth took a picture of you, and it made it look like you were a real astronaut in space. I went first. I put my face where the cardboard cutout was and smiled with the guy and said, "Cheese!" When it was my mom's turn to take her photo, I thought it would be funny to jump into her shot. The result was a picture of her as an astronaut suit hovering over Earth and me standing right next to her in my flip-flops doing bunny ears with my fingers. My mom's face crumpled when she saw her picture. She pleaded with the guy to let her take one more picture. But he said, no, one picture per person. For a second, I thought she was going to cry. We still had the picture, and every time I look at it, I wish I could go back in time. If I could do it all over again, I would not photobomb my mom's picture, and I'd give her more of my burger. Not the whole thing, but definitely some more bites. At the end of that summer, my dad got a job as an assistant fryer at a Chinese restaurant in California. That meant, that we didn't have to live in our car anymore, and we could move into a small one-bedroom apartment. It also meant that my dad brought home fried rice from work every day. But sometimes he also would bring back lots of blisters all up and down his arms. He said they were just allergies, but I didn't think so. I think he got them from frying food all day long in the sizzling wok. My mom got a job in the front of the restaurant as a waitress. Everybody liked her, and she got great tips. She even managed to convince the boss to let me go with her to the restaurant after school, since there was nobody there to look after me. My mom's boss was a wrinkly, white-haired Chinese man who reeked of garlic and didn't believe in wasting anything. Not cooking oil, not toilet paper, and certainly not free labor. "You think you can handle waitressing, kid?" he asked me. "Yes, sir," I said. Excitement pulsed in my ear. My first job, I was determined not to let him down. There was just one problem. I was only 9 then and needed 2 hands just to hold up one dish steadily. The other waitresses managed 5 plates at a time. Some didn't even need hands. They could balance a plate on their shoulder. When the dinner rush came, I too loaded up my carrying tray with 5 dishes. Big mistake. As my small back gave to the mountainous weight, all of my dishes came crashing down. Hot soup splashed onto customers. Fried prawns went flying across the restaurant. I was fired on the spot, and so was my mom. No amount of begging or promising to do dishes for the next gazillion years would change the owner's mind. The whole way home, I fought tears in my eyes. I thought of my 3 cousins back home. None of them had ever gotten fired before. Like me, they were only children as well. In China, every child is an only child, ever since the government decided all families are allowed only one. Since none of us had siblings, we were our siblings. Leaving them was the hardest part about leaving China. I didn't want my mom to see me cry in the car, but eventually that night, she heard me. She came into my room and sat on my bed. "Hey, it's okay," she said in Chinese, hugging me tight. "It's not your fault." She wiped a tear from my cheek. Through the thin walls, I could hear the sounds of husbands and wives bickering, babies welling from the neighboring apartments, each one as cramped as ours. "Mom," I asked, "why did we come here? Why did we come to America?" My mother looked away and didn't say anything for a long time. A plane flew overhead and the picture frames on the wall shook. She looked into my eyes. "Because it's freer here," she finally said, which didn't make any sense. Nothing was free in America. Everything was so expensive. "But Mom," "one day you'll understand," she said, kissing the top of my head. "Now go to sleep." I drifted to sleep, thinking about my cousins and missing them and hoping they were missing me back. After my mom got fired from the restaurant, she got very serious about job hunting. She called it getting back on her horse. It was 1993, and she bought every Chinese newspaper she could find. She pored over the job section with a magnifying glass like a scientist. That's when she came across an unusual listing. A man named Mr Yao had put an ad out in the Chinese newspaper looking for an experienced motel manager. The ad said that he owned a little motel in Anaheim, California, and he was looking for someone to run the place. The job came with free boarding, too. My mom jumped up and grabbed the phone. Our rent then cost almost all of my dad's salary. And who said things in America were free? To her surprise, Mr. Yao was equally enthusiastic. He didn't seem to mind that my parents weren't experienced and really liked the fact that there was a couple. 2 people for the price of 1, he joked in his thick Taiwanese accented Mandarin. When we went over to his house the next day, my parents smiled nervously while I tried to sit as still as I could and not screw it up for him like I'd screwed up my mother's restaurant job. We were sitting in the living room of Mr. Yao's house, or rather his mansion. I made myself look at the floor and not stare at the top of Mr. Yao's head, which was all shiny under the light, like it had been painted an egg white. The door opened and a boy about my age walked in. He had a t-shirt that said, "I don't give a," and underneath a picture of a rat and a donkey. I raised an eyebrow. "Jason," Mr. Yao said to the boy, "say hello." "Hi," he muttered. My parents smiled at Jason. "What grade are you in?" they asked him in Chinese. Jason replied in English, "I'm going into 5th grade." "Ah, same as Mia," my mother said. She smiled at Mr. Yao. "Your son's English is so good." She turned to me. "Hear that, Mia? No accent." My cheeks burned. My tongue felt weird in my mouth, like a limp lizard. "Of course he speaks good English. He was born here," Mr. Yao said. "He speaks native English." Native, I mouthed the word. I wondered if I really worked hard, would I be able to speak native English one day? Or was that something completely off limits to me? I looked over at my mom, who was shaking her head. Jason disappeared off to his room, and Mr. Yao asked my parents if they had any questions. "Just to make sure we can live at the motel for free," my mother asked. "Yes," said Mr. Yao. "And what about," my mom struggled to get the words out. She shook her head, embarrassed to say it. "Will we get paid?" "Oh, right, payment," Mr. Yao said, like it hadn't dawned on him at all. "How's $5 a customer?" I glanced at my mother. I could tell she was doing the math in her head because she always would get this dreamy smile on her face. 30 rooms at $5 a room. That's $150 a night, my mom said. Her eyes widened. She looked at my dad. "That's a lot of money." It was a humongous amount of money. We could buy hamburgers every day. One for each of us. We wouldn't even need to share. When can you start?" Mr. Yao asked. "Tomorrow," my mom and dad blurted out at exactly the same time. Mr. Yao laughed. As my parents got up to shake his hand, Mr. Yao muttered, "I have to warn you, it's not the nicest hotel in the world." My parents nodded. I could tell it made no difference to them what the motel looked like. It could look like the inside of a Greyhound bus toilet for all they cared. $150 a day plus free rent. We were in. The Cala Vista Motel sat on the corner of Coast Boulevard and Meadow Lane. It was a small motel, the first of 3 motels in a row. The Topaz Inn, the Lagoon Motel, was right next door and bigger, but I immediately decided that I liked our little motel the best. With its creamy walls and red doors, it looked warm and inviting. I looked up at the sign and read the words, "Low rates, cable TV, Disneyland, just 5 miles away." Excitedly, I asked my parents if that meant we could visit and go on all the rides at Disneyland. We probably could, my mom said. I smiled and savored the moment. Our lives were about to change. We were going to be Disneyland-going people. As if things couldn't get any better, the Cala Vista had a pool. It was right out front. The water sparkled under the golden sun. I closed my eyes and pictured myself doing cannonballs in the water all summer long. This was going to be amazing. Just behind the pool was the front office. I asked my parents in the car whether I could help out at the front desk. My dad had chuckled and said, "We'll see." Mr. Yao was waiting for us in the front office. He buzzed us in and lifted the divider so we could all get behind the front desk. The front desk was a long wooden desk that stretched among almost to the entire width of the room. Just behind the front office was the manager's quarters, where Mr. Yao led us next. There was a living room with a bed in it. He pointed to the bed. "You guys sleep there," he said to his parents, "so you can hear the customers in the middle of the night." "Customers come in the middle of the night?" my dad asked. Mr. Yao nodded. "Of course, it's a motel." "But won't that wake them up?" I asked. Mr. Yao rolled his eyes. "That's the point." Next, he led us over to the small bedroom, just to the right of the living room and kitchen. "The girl can sleep here," Mr. Yao said. For some reason, he still called me the girl, even though I had already told him my name several times. I put myself down in the small bedroom, then joined my parents and Mr. Yao in the front office. Mr. Yao was explaining the buzzer. "One wrong buzz, and it's all over," he said. "See that glass?" He pointed to thick glass enclosing the front office. "That's bulletproof glass. You see a bad guy come up, you don't need to worry. They can't hurt you. But if you press this buzzer," and he put his finger on the buzzer just under the front desk, and a loud buzz roared. "That door right there gets unlocked." "And then what?" I asked him. "Then he's inside," Mr. Yao said. He looked around to see if there was any other magic. Looked around to see if there were any other magic buttons or bulletproof glass inside the office. There weren't. I asked Mr. Yao, "How could we tell if someone was a bad guy?" "Based on how they look, of course," he said, which made me wonder, because it's not like bad people walk around with a sticker on their head saying, "I'm bad." "The bottom line is, don't let in any bad guys," Mr. Yao warned. His pupils expanded as he said the word bad. While Mr. Yao took my parents out back to show them the laundry room and cleaning supplies, I stayed in the front office. I climbed up on top of the front desk stool gently. I reached down and touched the buzzer with my finger. It was greasy, like it had been pressed 1,000,000 times. Slowly, I pressed on it, and I heard it zapped. I pressed it like buzz, buzz, buzz. Power coursed through my fingertips. I closed my eyes and pictured myself checking customers' in. "Yes, right this way, Miss Conley. I'll gladly show you to your room. Certainly, I can help you with your luggage. It would be my pleasure." So deep was I in my fake customer relations that I almost didn't hear it when a real customer walked up and tapped on the front office glass. I looked up to see a thin African-American man, about 50 or so, smiling and waving at me. He motioned with his hand for me to buzz him in. "All right." I then pressed on the buzzer. Buzz. He pushed open the door and walked in. "Just saw Mr. Yao in the lot. You must be the new managers," he said. He extended his hand across the front desk. "Name's Hank." I smiled, took his hand, and shook it. "I'm Mia. Nice to meet you." He tilted his head to one side. "How old are you, Mia?" "I'm 10. I told him. "Say, aren't you a little young to be running this place?" He teased me. I laughed. I liked Hank immediately. "I'm helping my parents," I told him. "What about you? Do you live here?" So I'm going to stop now, but I hope this gave you a little taste of how exciting this book can be as Mia meets the guests and interacts with new persons and discovers more about this new job and life for her family. Will she get to go to Disneyland? We'll have to see. Front Desk by Kelly Yang.